It is 19 hours 30 in Guyana, and it is time to enter room 592, where we unleash the truth this evening. Once again, as usual, at the helm of this evening's program is Dr. Yog Mahadeo, alongside senior journalist of Kaiser News, Leonard Gildarie, and their special guest this evening, Christopher Ram. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. How are you, sir? And Mr. Leonard Gildarie, my co-host tonight. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. You have me running up the step. I'm a little old, you know. You're very careful. You're putting me under a lot of pressure.
Well, that's good. And I know we are being joined by Mr. Ram. Mr. Ram, we cannot see you, sir. Are you hearing us? I know that we are to be joined also by Mr. Ralph Ramkarran. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we get our room 592 ongoing tonight, let me welcome you. To all of you across the country, across the Caribbean, US, UK, wherever you're joining us on Kaiser Radio, Kaiser Facebook, YouTube, from wherever you're coming in, welcome to room 592, where we unleash the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are being joined by two very respected and esteemed learned persons in Guyana. Mr. Christopher Ram, as everybody knows, Chris Ram's name is well known to all of Guyana. Fierce, a person who portrays his ideas and his beliefs and his philosophies fiercely to each and every one of us to ensure that we can learn and appreciate and understand. And he welcomes debate and dialogue. He's a chartered accountant, also an attorney at law. And as we welcome Mr. Chris Ram tonight, let me also say to each and every one of you, we are awaiting Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, who will also be joining us tonight as we try to get him on. I again welcome all of you to this room 592. Mr. Ram, are you hearing us, sir? We can't hear you, sir. Your audio.
On mute.
There you go. Thank you. Good night to you, sir. Welcome to room 592.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. And Leonard, just before we get Mr. Ram's ideas on a number of topics, a number of areas that we want to discuss with him, let me say that to our viewers and listeners, it is almost with some tears in my eyes that I will say to you all that, it is 54 years. Tomorrow will be 54 since our lovely country would have had its independence. Unfortunately, 54 years later, we are probably still seeing the same shades of humanity and our inability to be mature about political thinking and national progress as we were 54 years ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we get into our discussion, I want to wish you, for whatever it's worth, a happy Independence Day as we welcome Mr. Ram here and we get going with our discussion. Mr. Ram, welcome to our program, sir. And as you know, we want to discuss a couple of the finer points of especially the legal matters. Unfortunately, we're not going to lean too much on your accounting expertise, sir, but more of the legal matters. And sir, we want to get the ball going. I'm going to throw it right at you. I want to take a step back to Mingo's infamous declarations, the two of them, well, so-called purported declarations. And sir, here is the first question that we have for you. Could the commission have stopped Mingo from disobeying 84.1 the way he did? Given Section 18, Section 19 of the Elections Act that says that GECOM can directly instruct and can issue instruction to any officer in GECOM in the conduct of the election. Sir, could the commission have done better?
Not only could it have done better, but it ought to have done better. Let's take a private sector analogy. If a CEO of an entity sees that some blatant error, let alone fraud, is being committed, doesn't that CEO have an obligation to prevent it? And I'm not getting into the legal points of fiduciary duty and all of that, but of course, They do all of that. They have an obligation to hold elections that are free and fair and that reflect the view and the voting pattern and the voting conduct of the persons. So the short answer is yes, they had a duty to, and it still boggles my mind that GECOM, which is headed by a former High Court judge, would leave a fraudulent document, or as she calls it, holds it in abeyance. That is, quite frankly, inexplicable, and it's also disgraceful.
I wish to belabor the point a little bit more, Mr. Ram. A couple of nights ago, Vincent Alexander, GECOM commissioner, was on the same program, and he said that there was nothing that Lowenfield could have or ought to have done to stop Mingo. He said there is a clear segregation and no one could have interfered or intervened with what Mingo was doing.
That cannot be correct, either in law or in common sense. Mr. Alexander should say, or should have said, on which section of the Representation of the People's Act or the Elections Amendment Act of 2000 he was relying on, or indeed the Constitution, for such a preposterous postulation. It defies logic. And all I can say about Vincent Alexander is that he is betraying the trust that the Constitution imposes on him. Look, these elections were held on March 2nd. They had 15 days to declare the results, and the whole idea is that a country has to get moving. Elections is part of the daily routine journey of democracy. Vincent Alexander is treating elections almost as if they're a joke. And of course, he's got Claudette Singh there, not doing very much. And so we as a nation are being betrayed by the persons in whom we have placed our trust.
Mr. Ram, you mentioned that 15 days there, and this is one of the areas that a lot of viewers and listeners have reached out to Mr. Gildarie and I, that the GECOM's order has no time limit within which declarations should be made upon the completion of tabulation. However, we know, as you would instruct us, Section 99 of the RPA stipulates 15 days after the election. Sir, would that 15 days typically apply here? Can you tell us your views?
Well, of course it can. Now, you did law yourself, you. We have this distinction between directory and mandatory. Mm-hmm. Now, in fact, you don't have to take 15 days, and there may be particular circumstances, but surely you should be guided by that 15 days. The problem is, by the time they moved even to recount, I think something like 42 days, or 52 days may already have expired beyond the 15 days. So it was quite disgraceful for Claudette Singh to ignore her statutory or constitutional and her fiduciary obligation and to pretend it does not exist. Look, I don't ascribe to people like Desmond Trotman, Charles Corbyn, Robeson-Ben, who are not lawyers. They may not understand these things, but that's why this woman was chosen. And I don't want to get involved. The persons who have presided over the most flawed elections in Ghana have been justices of our courts. And you just look down the line. Bullers being Sir Donald Jackson, Sir Harold Bullers. These are the kinds of people. And it makes me almost embarrassed to say I'm an officer of the court.
But Mr. Ram, in construction of the order, I mean, we cannot sit in the minds of the commission, but in construction of that order, Why would they have left that part out, you think, sir? Or wasn't it needed, a declaration time, a period for declaration, sorry?
You know, Yogan, Lionel, you're not being edged out of this program, are you?
No, no, no. I'm listening to you. You see, when you have two lawyers in the room, I'm going to have to stay very quiet as I learn. I see the hair, and then I realize I'm losing my hair, and you're growing your hair. But
You
go ahead.
know, there is something I've drawn to the attention of the public in a letter I've sent to the press today. These elections are being overseen by the Caribbean community under an aid memoir signed by David Granger, Barra Jaglio, and Orwell LaRock. I don't like to talk too much at all. But this thing has international law implications. Here you're entering into, and it's called an agreement. They agreed. If you read this document, it says they agreed. That's an international commitment made by David Granger. And so when Claudette Singh is not a signatory to this aid memoir, but she must know of the existence of this aid memoir. In fact, she was in the court at Diamond on that Saturday morning when this whole issue of the agreement between CARICOM, Jaglio, and Granger came up. I want to make one additional point. In this aid memoir, having got the recitals and set out the facts, it then says they agreed. The high-level team would operate within the framework of the Constitution, the applicable law, the role of GECOM, and the rulings of the court. Bullet point 3 says that a total recount of all ballots from all electoral districts in regions 1 to 10 would take place urgently. Now, people don't usually have to underline words. Granger found it necessary to underline that word urgently. Yet Claudette Singh and her merry band, GECOM, and I'm not taking sides on this, I hold the entire GECOM responsible, meaning all the Claudette Singh and all 6 commissioners, for ignoring the imperative for them to have acted with considerable speed, given that so much time had already elapsed. As I said, this aid memoir is dated 15th of March. And when did we start the recount? 6th or 7th, I think it was the 6th of May. Just think of the number of days that would have been already expired. GECOM is on go slow. And Claudette Singh, as the holder of the decisive vote, has got to take the lion's share of the responsibility for what this country, the torture that this country is having to endure because of the failure to deliver on these elections. I was speaking with a Surinamese friend this morning, and I said to him, you know, I know you have your elections tonight. In fact, he's supposed to send me a note to say how I could keep tab on what's happening in Suriname. And I said, please don't declare the results before Guyana does. Otherwise, you will be embarrassing us. He said he couldn't promise that. But that's the position in which these clowns at GECOM have put Guyana, the laughing stock, on the world stage.
Correct. Well, Chris, the other thing too is
but I'm glad you've gone to Chris. You and this story.
So, the truth is there has been very, very frequent um, uh, direct communication from the chairman. The most recent being her expression in a memo where she disagreed. Well, she didn't disagree. She disagreed that SACE could have said she had spoken, but said that he who asserts must prove. And let's welcome Senior Ralph Ramkarran to the stage. Sir, Senior, welcome.
Thank you very much. My apologies for being late. I am totally at a loss with these technical stuff.
Don't
I
worry,
can
sir.
sit in front,
We'll
sit in
give you
front of a
opportunity to
camera
make
and
up for it.
He's in good company.
You mean me? You mean me? Yeah.
I must tell you that we just now, Mr. Ram and Leonard and myself, we discussed two important things. One was the infamous declaration, so-called declaration from Mingo, and whether the commission had a right under law to intervene to ensure that the breach of Section 84(1) did not take place. And Mr. Ram quite rightly answered that yes, they have every right, both under practice and law, to intervene and to ensure that such breaches could not have occurred, and it would have saved us 3 months of time.
Oh yeah, the Constitution, Article 164 is quite clear that the Commission has power to intervene. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And
Right.
the Commission acted under that article when it did intervene.
Right. And Senior, we also discussed, you joined us when we were just discussing that the order lacks a time limit upon which GECOM could make a declaration. It is silent on how many days. And Mr. Ram was expressing his opinion as to whether the 15 days of Section 99 of the RP would apply in this case or not.
Let me sorry. Okay, Ralph, you go on.
Well, I was going to say that the PVP did it in 2006, I think it was, when they went beyond the 15 days to call the parliament. And the matter was taken to court, and the Court of Appeal, in my view, rightly said that, look, this is not a mandatory rule. I mean, what do you do if it was mandatory? You couldn't go backwards. So I agree that this is the fact that the violation is a serious violation, but the fact that they've already violated it, there's little one can do about it.
Chris, you were saying?
Well, I wouldn't say there's little. Surely the thing to do, and I mean, we did say it was directory and not mandatory, but the obvious thing to do is if you have fallen behind time, what do? You make extraordinary efforts to catch up. And even though this question of the 15 days is directory rather than mandatory, surely reasonable time, democracy, practicality of having a government in place. Do you know that we're heading for the end of the 5th month of the year, and this country does not have a budget for the year? It has not had a parliament for close to 1 year, and yet we claim to say that we're a parliamentary democracy. So surely Claudette Singh and her merry band ought to recognize that there must be some urgency. It has gone beyond just being reasonable. Now it's an urgent that this matter be addressed. We need to have a proper government, a de jure government.
But on that note, Mr. Ram and Mr. Ramkarran, is GECOM required to use the matrices, to use the tabulation of this recount to make a declaration, sirs?
It is required. That is what they say they will do. The order of recount, which was made under Section 22 of the Election Laws Amendment Act, provides that the reports, the statements of recount are to be prepared, and from which the CEO will give a report, and they will then consider the report. What does all that mean? It must mean if they make an order to do a recount, and the recount order itself contains a proposal for the CEO to make a report. Obviously, they have to consider that report and then make a decision as to what they should do. And they have to give a declaration. They have to give a declaration. They can't do nothing. The question is, what should the declaration be? There is a lot of argument going on. I don't know why there is such arguments as to whether they can make a declaration of the results. In my view, they have to make a declaration. They have no choice. The alternative is to refuse to make a declaration for some reason. I can't imagine what reason it could be. To say we can't make a declaration, let us go back to the results of the count. What the status of the count is that the Mingo declaration, on which the CEO has prepared a report and presented it to the commission, the Mingo declaration is the subject of court proceedings, contempt court proceedings, which have been stayed on the basis that the chairman of the commission went to court and undertook that she will be ordering, the commission will be ordering a recount. So that's the status, very unsatisfactory status, but I don't know where this idea is coming from that the commission cannot or would not or may not make a declaration.
Well,
They have to make.
Senior, just before I ask Mr. Ram for his thoughts there is a couple of things. A lot of people are looking, as you know, the general population, people like myself and Mr. Gildarie, we are not as legally mindful as you both are, but it's people are looking at what may be perceptible gaps. So, for example, GECOM has said they are holding the last set of declarations in abeyance until they are replaced by something. So if, God forbid, this recount comes to a stop for whatever reason, does it mean that the last set of declarations are going to be held up?
Well, I don't know what else they could have done with the declaration. Only a court order can quash the declaration. The Mingo has made a declaration, rightly or wrongly in our view. He has made a declaration of false figures. But he has made a declaration, and unless a court says, as it did in relation to his first declaration, unless a court says that, look, your declaration is unlawful, the second declaration, the commission itself, I'm not sure that they're empowered to say so themselves. So they reject the declaration, but in the meantime, it is in abeyance. That's quite okay. I think.
But Senior, this doesn't follow the logic. If we are saying that GECOM could have intervened and could have declared, in other words, they could have said that Mingo, whatever you did here does not satisfy 84.2. They don't need a court to tell them that it doesn't satisfy 84.2, 84.1, do they?
No, they don't need a court to do that. But let's look at what happens in a recount, in a count situation, where a presiding officer does the count. The count goes up to the returning officer, and an application is made for a recount. Nothing happens to the declaration of the presiding officer. It is not quashed for any reason. It remains valid until it is changed by the by the returning officer if he finds if he arrives at a different figure. I don't think it's a very issue as to what happens to the votes of what of the first set of votes, of the votes on the count. I don't think that is a big issue. What I'm very concerned about is that the argument that is going on among
But senior, before we come to those arguments, let me solicit Mr. Ram's comments, if any, on that same area, with regards to requirement to make a declaration using the results of the recount, Mr. Ram, and then we're gonna go to the other issues.
Returning officer is a member of staff of GECOM. He's supervised directly by the chief elections officer, and they collectively are responsible and answerable to GECOM. Now, I drew a private sector analogy earlier in this discussion. Ralph is saying that there's nothing they can do. Surely, if you have compelling evidence, or certainly compelling claims that your officer has committed a grave act of fraud, you have internal evidence, you have the statements of polls. Surely, any responsible organization, and Ralph himself heads a very reputable organization, surely you call for an internal investigation. There is nothing in the law that prevents GECOM from saying, look, we, in our duty to declare, to conduct elections that are free and fair and transparent, must ensure that our officers who act in our names have acted legally and honestly. So at the minimum, GECOM should have carried out an internal investigation. Tonight marks 84 days. You can take away 2 days. Since they would have known about this fraud, listen, GECOM had copies of the statements of polls. You're going to tell me these clowns have not thought, let us check what has happened? How come we have been brought into such disrepute? I'm not talking about a declaration by the court. I'm talking about the responsibility of GECOM to deliver elections and election results.
Thank you, Mr. Ram. So, gentlemen, given GECOM's reluctance to take forthright action, how then, as a population, we can sit here and think that GECOM will make a declaration? And let me explain it this way. The second recital of the GECOM order uses the words final credible count. Final credible count. With all of these accusations that has been making the airways recently, that it seems to be pointing, well, not pointing. Today, Mr. Harman was saying 80-something thousand votes that have been rigged. And yes, day before yesterday, Mr. Aubrey Norton was saying this elections is rigged and all of that. They're pointing to an election that has not been credible. To you, Senior, and to you, Mr. Ram, if an argument is made that the elections were not credible, could GECOM then be forced to make a declaration from elections that were not credible? Mr. Ram, Mr. Ram, sorry, Senior, you want to go first? You're Senior, of course.
I don't know. Well, let's start from the beginning. The count is going on, a recount is going on. The count was not completed. It's purportedly completed, but not in effect completed because of the issues with the Mingo declaration. A recount is being corrected now, and this recount has to operate on the basis of certain rules. Those rules were set out by GECOM in its recount order. Now, where there are problems in relation to the recount, for example, a vote an X on a ballot does not clearly indicate the intention of the voter. That's one example. That ballot has to be discarded. So you have issues like that. The recount order specifies some other issues which are not normally taken into consideration in a recount under the Representation of People Act. But nothing takes into account the possibility of an objection that somebody is dead and somebody has voted for that person, or somebody has migrated and somebody has voted for that person. And the law makes a provision for that. So GECOM will arrive at a credible result based on its rules. So who is determining the credibility? GECOM is determining not Mr. Norton or Mr. Harmon. I mean, it's, out of enthusiasm.
Senior, sorry to cut in, but it is the same GECOM that has been unwilling to stop a clear breach of law to be foisted upon this nation when Mingo purposely chose to not abide with Section 84. How can we then think that all of these questions about lack of credibility will not now push GECOM in a corner?
We don't know. We don't know. We have to keep talking about it, and we have to. GECOM can say at the end of the day that, look, all these objections is 89,000 or 86,000, and that's only half the votes that have been counted. 86,000 multiplied by 2, 160 odd or 70 odd thousand people are fraudulent voters. And the elections are not correct. GECOM can do that. Well, there's nothing we can do here to stop it. But the problem is it will be totally irregular.
But then we are saying, and Mr. Ram, I want to come to you with this one, because if you go back to Chief Justice, I think it was Bernard's the Hamilton case. When she said, I agree that if the results of the elections are tainted by disenfranchisement of voters or multiple voting, these issues can only be ventilated at the hearing of an election petition. I have no power in these proceedings to deal with such unlawful acts or omissions. But the point is, Mr. Ram, what assurance, if any, can this nation have that GECOM is not going to take a back seat once again and wait for something untoward to happen and then say, hey, these elections lack credibility and we cannot declare it? Is that a possibility, sir?
With Claudette Singh, anything is possible. And that's the unfortunate fact. Let's go back. We're talking about the count. The count was indeed completed, but the fraud was not at the count. Correct. The fraud was at the tabulation. The count was just a compromise made by Jagdeo because the government, I was hearing some background. So it was the tabulation that was fraudulent. But it was agreed that a recount. And I come back to this aid memoir. We keep talking about GECOM's order. GECOM's order, of course, has its place. But we have an aid memoir signed by the top 2 political leaders of this country with a regional body that has international status and that says that they've got, this is about a recount, and this is what bullet point 5 says in that aid memoir, to abide by the outcome of a fair and transparent process for the recount. What Claudette Singh is doing is she's appointing herself now to be the judicial officer. Claudette Singh is talking about bring me the evidence and I will make a ruling. That's not how a chairperson operates. So this is all about a recount. This nonsense about give me this and give me that and give me illegal evidence, illegally obtained evidence. birth certificates and death certificates. Those are clearly illegally obtained evidence. Our law does not allow that kind of thing. Claudette Singh does not know that, Ralph. She, and all the cases, you look at Petrie, you look at Hamilton, you look at Esther Pereira, it is very clear. And Chief Justice Roxanne George also made that point. Leave these matters for an election petition. Let us get on with the government in this country. The trouble is, we have been so accustomed to misgovernance and malgovernance and corruption and incompetence and thieving that if the government shuts down, you hardly notice. But it is in the scheme of the life of a country. It is very important. Our Constitution, look at the preamble, is premised on the rule of law. We are violating that, and the chief violator at this stage is Claudette Singh. I have no apologies to make in saying that.
And Yog, if I may come in here, I want to ask the two gentlemen, or the two seniors, this question here. Is it the courts or GECOM's responsibility to delve into any elections or irregularities? We see in two different opinions. Today, Basil Williams said it is GECOM's, and Nanlal a few days back says it is the courts. What is the opinion of you two gentlemen?
Well, there is no doubt whatsoever that the laws of Guyana require an election petition to file if you're challenging illegal acts which may influence the results of the elections. There is no doubt, and there are many cases since the 90s, since the early 90s, which have said so. Very important cases. So there's not in doubt. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
I'm shocked that a lawyer who claims the statute that Basil Williams claims will say such a ridiculous nonsense.
Mr. Ram, your comment on the question.
I don't think anyone takes Basil Williams seriously, and he ought not to be taken seriously. Basil Williams, almost everything, he went there the other day and he made a set of idiotic statements. The president then decided, look, I am saying this and I speak to the government, and Basil Williams then denies he said it. So I don't think we should leave Basil Williams out of this discussion.
But to harp on that topic a little bit more, indeed, and Mr. Ram, you're right. The Esther Pereira case, it is the same Claudette Singh that said even if an unlawful or omission is proved, the election would be valid if the conduct of the elections was substantially. Basically, she's saying that it will have to go to an elections petition. But here is a question, Mr. Ramkarran and Mr. Ram. Does GECOM is different from the court? Would GECOM be confined to that fine line of saying, okay, this now must go to an election petition because we choose not to delve into these challenges? Or is GECOM compelled to leave the challenges and make a declaration after the recount?
There's no fine line, and the question is about what GECOM can do anything. I mean, Claudette Singh sat down upstairs in the Ashman's building and allowed a false declaration to be made and did nothing, and then continued and allowed a second false declaration to be made and did nothing. So GECOM can do anything they want. GECOM can say and do anything. We can't stop them. But the fact of the matter is there is no fine line between the violation of a law and the commission of illegal acts which may affect the results of the elections and normal election procedures. What happens at the elections? You see, the Constitution says elections must be free and fair, and they set up systems to provide for that, such as the Elections Commission and so on. But free and fairness is defined in the Representation of the People Act in very fine detail. about how you vote and how your name must be on the list. You must be registered. You must have an identification. You go and you mark your name must be on the on the list. You produce your identification. The ballot must be stamped. You put the X and so on and so on. You stain your finger. All these procedures make the free and fair way of voting. And those are the matters that GECOM is concerned with. When it goes beyond that, when it goes beyond those things, GECOM has to take the position, go to the court. GECOM can't investigate anything. GECOM is not an investigative body. GECOM is not a court of law.
Plus, it shouldn't investigate itself, right?
Right.
Mr. Ram?
Well, look, GECOM conducted elections which all the observers, all, and politicians accepted was that their conduct was impeccable. It was incident-free. GECOM has not indicated a single complaint or report of double voting. It's the sort of thing there's a policeman outside the door. I recall going and vote. There's a policeman there. You try impersonation and see what happens. So everything has been done entirely in accordance with the procedures laid down by GECOM. And there is such a heavy paper trail. People like to say, oh, we should get rid of this document and that document, and we must do everything online. But the one strength of the paper trail, like the 10 copies of the statements of polls, the posting it on the door of the polling station, those things guarantee the fairness and the accuracy. Anybody can go and take them. The Kaicho News reporters, they went and they took photographs. Guyana Times, Sabbath News, all of them did that. This is not in any doubt. And what is happening is that APNU has been changing its position. I remember the first night they said they thought, the first thing the next morning they said they won by 5 seats. Granger came, I think it was on the 5th, outside Lamaha Street, and he was presented by Simona Brooms and Joseph Harmon and Raphael Trotman, and said, oh, Harmon said he's seen the results and they have won, and Granger endorsed that kind of thing. Now everything is catching up with these people until you get this absurd situation of Harmon saying that the PPP got 86,000 votes illegally. That is 39 votes per station. In some cases, stations have less than 100. That is 40% you're talking about. Harmon is saying, now I've never known Harmon to be smoking, so I don't know what influence he might have been under. But the PPP got 202 votes in 2020. Now, if they got 232,000 votes, did I say 202,000? And in 2015, 232,000 in 2020. If you were to take Harmon's position, then the legitimate votes cast in favor of the PPP is 146,000, or 37% decline. Think of the absurdity of these claims. Is this the kind of thing? And Ralph, you know the Winsbury principle. Yog, you know it. We all know it. That you got to be rational in your decision. There is no basis for what is taking place. This is all about the desperation of the APNU, because as we have seen, even in this lame duck situation, they go and spend $1 billion A woman who can't rig an election properly wants to spend $1 billion, and look at the mess that is happening with COVID. Harman is now in charge, is the CEO of COVID. Why is he making these kinds of statements? And Claudette Singh is writing Mr. Harman. What is he writing her? Is she writing him in his capacity as head of COVID or campaign co-chairman, and saying, give me the evidence? She is not in a court of law. She is in an administrative body. And she has this whole business of the 15 days is so that you get on with the elections. You get on with the declaration. Let the court take care of itself. Look at all the cases. You know, the US itself has many, many cases, but you look at the website, you see Nigeria and India and all these places, especially those countries with federal system, because they have in various areas, they have election petition. There is no basis for what Claudette Singh is doing. But as Ralph said, there is nothing to stop her.
Correct.
And
well,
so we may be on a path of not of self-destruction, but of destruction engineered by the APNU, AFC, and facilitated by GECOM, led by Claudette Singh.
Well, another finer point that I wanted your opinions on would be that paragraph 11 requires, this is of the order, paragraph 11 of the order requires that the certificate of tabulation must be made available to the public. I know that 2 of the districts would have been completed and certificates would have been prepared. But other than those certificates being circulated through the party agents, I don't know that GECOM would have made these certificates public. Isn't that therefore, if it's a breach of their own order, isn't that therefore a descent or a clear signal of things, descending again?
Quite frankly, I think sometimes it's difficult to use rational yardstick to judge what GECOM is doing. It should be publicized. We know that in Region 1, the APNU agent signed it. In Region 2, incidentally, Yog, one more, Region 5 was completed today.
Yes.
So you now have 3.
Yes.
But there is no requirement that these people not sign it. The reason why APNU, AFC is not signing it is so that they could come and say, look, we never agreed with it in the first place. It is all part of their narrative, is to support this myth on which they have embarked, that there has been such a massive rigging of an election. This would put the PPP, the only opposition party that is able to rig an election by over 20%. What were the APNU agents doing? What were the GECOM officers doing? What was the presiding officer doing? Each polling station has a presiding officer. All these people were conned. They were neutralized. They were put to sleep, whilst all these PPP voters came and voted and spiritually and walked out. This thing is so far-fetched that it would take a good author, a good writer, novelist, to make up such a story.
Senior, I want to come to you on something. Sorry, Leonard, I'm going to allow you just now. I know I've been dominating it.
No,
Senior, I want to just throw back these same 2 things that you use. Paragraph 10 of the order uses the word shall in terms of requiring the signature of the contesting parties on the tabulation matrix. Is that shall mandatory or directory? And the paragraph 11 that requires a public to make the certificate of tabulation public. Sir, as head of your party list, has GECOM complied with its own order?
Well, all it means is that the officer must ask for the signature.
Okay.
To require the signature, must ask. Doesn't mean that it must be signed. So that if GECOM doesn't ask for the signature, that's
Gotcha.
a step. But you know, in a fit of enthusiasm, young Mr. Nandalal was addressing a press conference. And what Chris was saying just now reminded me of the word, either he, in the enthusiasm, he said the word, or he coined it. He coined a word, ludicrosity. So I think what Chris, he coined a verb from the word ludicrous and called it ludicrosity. So what Chris was saying just now about all these returning officers who have been bribed and all of that, you know, it's just ludicrous that APNU can make these claims. My son, who has been who was appointed a presiding officer on 2 occasions in two local government elections, applied again for a post of presiding officer. He didn't even receive the reply. And he's fully qualified, highly qualified, and he didn't even receive a reply. So GECOM didn't say. One has to assume. They didn't say, well, look, you were disqualified for the following reasons. One must assume, therefore, that GECOM deliberately denied him the job. So GECOM would have been discriminating in favor of people who they have some preference for. So how PVP can bamboozle all of these people is a mystery.
Right. Well, Senior, I wanted to ask you a question that was unrelated to the looking at the laws and so forth, but we'll keep that for another occasion because I heard one of your team persons accuse you of rigging previous elections, but we'll come to that in another discussion. Leonard, you had a question for?
No, I wanted to spin off from that, Yogi. If there's anything legally in that order that forces the coalition to accept the results of the recount or the declarations. Why I'm asking that, and this from layman's language. I see the president today in his independence message await the declaration of GECOM. The language is very, very careful, and it doesn't really say that, look, we are going to accept. What it says, await. So I want to ask if the order specifically says that the coalition must, or the parties must accept the results or the declarations of the recount.
Well, nothing said except that the aid memoir may say something to that effect, that they shall accept the results of the recount. But there's nothing in there's nothing that Granger has said in his statements over the past week or two, from which one can draw the conclusion that he has definitively promised that he will accept the results of the recount. He will accept the declaration of the results of the recount issued by the chairman of the elections commission.
But Senior, he doesn't have, Mr. Ram, the president doesn't have an option. I mean, if GECOM makes a declaration, that's it, isn't it?
He doesn't have an option. If he rejects the declaration, lawfully rejects, he can say, look, I am forced by law to accept this declaration. I'm accepting it. If the PVP wins, they will take the presidency. If I win, I'll be sworn in.
Mr. Ram?
But he can say, but the president can say, I don't agree and I don't accept this declaration. He can say that. Legally accepting it and factually rejecting it are two different things.
Okay. Mr. Ram?
Look, we are assuming that things are done based on the rule of law. Granger has signed this aid memoir that has international law implications. He has said, the aid memoir said they agreed to abide by the outcome of a fair and transparent process for the recount. So what idiocy it would take for Granger to now turn around and say, no, I don't accept it. When CARICOM itself, CARICOM is here that the high-level team would operate within the framework of the Constitution, the applicable law, the role of GECOM, and the rulings of the court. They will make a report. You know, it's one thing for us to say that this is not going to happen, but what we have to assume that at some point this country has got to get back to sanity. And this nonsense by Harman, and I'm glad of this opportunity tonight that we can deal with it. What is he doing? He's head of COVID. You've got a nightmare situation taking place. People breaking down doors at the Diamond Center. We've just had another death in an Amerindian community. That's what Harman should be concerning himself about. They are bound. And we're not talking law here. But this, the chairperson of GECOM didn't come here for a social visit. She came here and she was party to an agreement between the leaders of this country and CARICOM. To violate that in such a simplistic manner that Granger and Harman and the rest of them seem to want is to set this country on a slide that will take us longer than the Burnham's 28 years, Burnham plus those who followed him, to 1992. And this is why we've got to stop making excuses and we've got to say what the correct position is. Let them violate it. Let their absurdity be seen. And as we were talking about language and Ralph was talking about ludicrosity, Ralph, you said, well, a new term, a new word has also been coined. It's called domingo. Domingo means to fraudulently transform numbers into something else.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Our time is up for our Room 592 discussion tonight. And let me thank Mr. Christopher Ram and Senior Mr. Ralph Ramkarran for joining us tonight. Chris, thank you so much. Mr. Ralph, thank you so much. And to my co-host, Leonard Gildarie, sir, thank you. Our technical operator, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been it from Room 592. Tomorrow night, we have the former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to talk about previous elections and, of course, his opinion for the current election in Room 592. Bye-bye now. Have a great night and happy independence, one and all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.